Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and I am joined today by two very special people, CCP Aurora and CCP Swift. I just want to jump straight into this interview, basically, and so I will begin by introducing my guests. First, CCP Aurora. First of all, both of these people come from the EVE community, so they were well known within their communities and by the community for very specific things, and now they lend those things to us from the other side of the fence, as it were. So CCP Aurora comes from Brave Newbies and was a key piece of the Brave Dojo, which taught new players how to play the game. Brave Newbies is, of course, a very large organization that helps new players get into the game and get engaged. And she also was pretty big on tournament competitive scenes and that sort of thing. And then CCP Swift, of course, was formerly Elise Randolph, who is very outspoken in almost every definition of the word. Long-term member of the AT staff, as it were. He was a cornerstone of Talking Stations for a while. He and I, in fact, the very first iteration of this show was Elise Randolph, myself, and Mike Azariah getting together. So long history with the community. And yeah, and so now they both have been joining the community team during a very kind of tumultuous time for EVE Online. And this last couple of weekends, we have seen kind of the fruit of their labor with the return of the Alliance tournament. So I think that's enough for my side of things. How are you guys? How have the last couple of weeks been?
The last couple of weeks have been super stressful. I've basically spent most of my time staring at server logs and praying that nothing broke. But it was really good to have a successful event at the end of it.
Yes, putting on such a big production is never smooth. Stress is always part of the puzzle. Speaking of which, there are already people commenting on the fact that CCP Swift is hiding behind his avatar. We actually had some last minute technical difficulties, so we just decided to move on with the avatar appearance. So them dastardly Triglavians disrupted his broadcast, so we're just going to have to listen to the dulcet tones of CCP Swift. So that said, how are you, CCP Swift?
Great. I'm still recovering from the weekend. It was amazing, but also exhausting at the same time, just because there's like so much going on and like so much to do, so much to like kind of worry about, because this is such a big project that hits close to so many people that we want to make sure we got it right. So luckily I had the easy job, which was just like kind of sit back and watch and try and put out any fires that happened, and there were no fires. So it was just really nice. I got to watch the AT, hang out with the EVNT people, and yeah, it was just amazing to see this project come back to life. As you mentioned, I was involved on the player side for some time, going back to Alliance Tournament 10, where I did like commentary. I played in the tournament and did stuff like that. And then got like more and more involved in putting on the tournament from a player perspective. And now I got to come over to CCP's side and engage with the project that way, which has been a huge labor of love. Like the amount of effort that CCP Aurora has put into this thing in order to get it off the ground cannot be understated or overstated or anything stated. Like it was just amazing. Like we've got this channel where it's like, hey, if you're staying at the office after 8, you have to like post in here so we can turn off the security alarm. And it's basically turned into the CCP Aurora is here working channel. So hopefully that'll end now that the tournament is over. But I know when it ended, the first thing that we both thought was, shit, we got to like start preparing for next year now, because AT18 is just around the corner.
Right. So we'll get to future stuff later. But yeah, I want to go all the way back to the beginning of your guys' story. When CCP Aurora, you were hired first, and I really started to muse about this then, but especially when CCP Swift was hired, the one thing that kind of resonated with me was that both of you were deeply invested in alliance tournaments and other forms of competition, or like esports of EVE Online. And the reason why that was very important was because historically, the alliance tournament has basically just been a labor of love, right? One of the reasons why it was always kind of tenuous and why it went away was because if devs weren't willing to put in extra time outside of their work, basically, in order to make it happen, it didn't. So every year that it happened, it was to those devs' credit. And but when you guys were brought on board, I saw it as a clear signal that CCP was showing renewed interest in esports. Now, obviously, the results are clear, but how much of that do you feel was CCP interested in this, and therefore you guys were targeted for acquisition, or how much of it was once you got in, you're like, okay, I'm willing to be in here, but we're getting an alliance tournament again? Let's start with CCP Aurora, since you were the first person to come on.
Yeah. So when I came on, one of the first things, one of the first things I started doing was poking around and trying to feel out, like, okay, what is the status of this alliance tournament thing? It wasn't a huge part of my onboarding or anything. I think there was absolutely some latent interest, but the difficulty was largely the fact that it was, at the current time, they thought that the tool was broken. The tool that had been previously, I'm knocking stuff over on my desk. The tool that had been previously used for the Alliance tournament was broken, and it was tricky to get the dev time to fix it. And they didn't really expect community developers to go figure out how to remake that. So they were looking at, the company was kind of looking at esports from, maybe other angles. The Proving Grounds are one of those, to kind of provide a new outlet that may or may not have been, to replace the tool. They kind of went a slightly different direction. And as I saw them kind of going a different direction, I'm like, all right, I'm going to go make this thing happen. And so I started to work on it.
Yeah, it really did seem that, or I got the impression that it wasn't like a lack of will on those who put on the production of the Alliance tournament, but that rather that the tools that are used were becoming increasingly out of sync with the ever-changing code base of EVE Online, to a point where it just became untenable and required a lot of dev effort, which again would basically be a volunteer effort, right? So CCP Swift, what was the state of things by the time you came on board?
So when I arrived, which was kind of like in the end of February, beginning of March, at least remote, I was like, all right, I am eager, like very similar to CCP Aurora. I was like, I'm eager to try and see what the Alliance tournament state is. Like I heard rumors, I have like internal thoughts, but I want to know the behind the scenes, what's going on here. And then CCP Aurora is like, oh yeah, I did it. and like it was very matter of fact, and it was like very true as well. Like she had laid out all the groundwork for how to put on an Alliance tournament, how to make it so it can be done again in the future. Like the whole goal is not to just bring it back for a one and done, but to have it sustainable for the future, that the community team can run and manage effectively. So she basically did all the work, and I just got to sit in here, and I did a few things to help out. Obviously, like I helped with some of the rules. Some of the point stuff is like a lot of it is very much a collaborative effort, but for like the 99.9% of it, it was already done before I even stepped foot.
Okay, so let's circle back then on that. CCP Aurora, in my introduction to you, I said, and she did some tournament stuff or something like that. Now, clearly, CCP Swift is really good at getting known by the community for a very long time. I will admit that you were less well known by me. I had to do a little bit of homework when I saw you as a hire. So you want to talk about your experience with tournaments specifically, and how you applied that to this task of getting everything ready by the time Swift got there?
Yeah, I never may have stuck my head up as much as other players, but I've been around. So my initially getting started in tournaments. I was in Brave. I had done a lot of work with the dojo, and much as anyone who does a lot of teaching work will tell you, the teacher spends a lot of time, just as much time learning as their students, sort of thing. And I learned a whole lot more about the game, and I got a fair bit better at it during that whole process. And I was known to be a good pilot, kind of towards the end of when I was doing the majority of my dojo work, and Alliance Tournament 16 was coming on. And the previous team captain had left the Alliance. So there was a lot of brain drain on our Alliance Tournament team. And so I wound up joining the team because I was interested in playing. It looked like a bunch of fun. And then it kind of came down to this discussion of like, all right, we need a shot caller, we need a captain. And so I was co-captain I was made co-captain, voted, I guess. I'm not entirely sure how that process happened, but
the goblin method of leadership, and you didn't step forward, everybody else stepped back. It sounds like
sort of. I think there were a couple people who were the kind of remnant leadership from the Alliance tournament of years past, or from the previous team, who hadn't left with the previous captain, and so they had basically run through a bunch of different people, and they were like, yeah, you're a shot caller. You're the best we have. Good luck. And so I started hardcore organizing practices, and it was a ton of work, a lot of cat herding, and like scheduling and all of that sort of thing. I came up with drills that we would run every day. So I was quite active. It was a lot of work, but a lot of fun. And then in Alliance Tournament 16, I led us to a couple wins. It wasn't an amazing run, but I had a lot of fun doing it. I learned a whole lot about the tournament, and I've just kind of carried that forward until now. I also started up some smaller tournament events, just kind of internally in Brave, and I was about to start trying to branch them out kind of when I got this position.
Right.
But we were running, like, I had an extensible rule set. So it was built such that you could run a tournament style match with however many people you had. So you could run it as a 4v4 or a 12 versus 12. And the rules would just kind of expand to match, which was super complicated. And the setup was a bit onerous, but it was gave me a lot of experience sort of setting up that sort of rule set and that sort of thing. I learned a lot.
So going back to my initial question then, do you think that you had done that successfully? Do you think that factored into their reason, their desire to bring you on board?
I'm not so sure how much the Alliance tournament stuff factored into my hiring.
Like the fact that you had done the system for Brave.
Not as much as other things.
Okay.
I think the more major factors were the fact that I was really active in teaching new players the game, and with the strong push for improving new player resources and stuff, that was a major thing. And since then, I've contributed quite a bit to the new EVE Academy. A lot of those videos and stuff that are on there, I've written the scripts for those.
Yes.
And it was that, and the fact that I just showed like decent community skills. I was very active on EVE Twitter and that sort of thing. So
fair enough.
Just being clearly active in the community was a big step.
So it does sound to me like it wasn't like CCP had an active, like there was no boardroom thing where it was like, we want to bring back esports. We need to find community managers to do that. It's more like both of you were already very well respected within the community, just broadly. And it almost just so happened that as part of that, you were both into esports and therefore willing to make this come back. That sound about right?
That sounds about right.
Okay. All right. Well, and then CCP Swift, once you got in, if everything was already done, are you just here to take credit for everything then? Or like, did you help get this across the finish line in any way?
I was very willing to help wherever I could because obviously, like, this is a huge element of why I love EVE Online, right? I started all the way back in Alliance Tournament 6 was my first Alliance tournament, and I was just smitten, and I needed to keep doing it. And without that, I probably wouldn't be playing EVE Online. Like, there's a lot of stories where my friends and people I've run across through an EVE were like, yeah, if it wasn't for this tournament, I wouldn't keep coming back. But I definitely got hooked because of the tournament. And then I ended up inheriting an Alliance for a while, which was pretty fun. But still, the Alliance tournament was always something that I really, really enjoyed, and I wanted to especially bring back. So I was around to answer like questions, help with like production stuff because I'd been involved with it before. Just be like a bit of a resource as well, which didn't really need because Aurora had already been in the tournament before and was familiar with the format and all that stuff. So basically, yeah, I just kind of like floated around and got to go on podcasts to talk about the tournament. So it has been fun. I did have a lot of fun with the rule set, coming up with it and coming up with like the point values and things like that. I think collectively we probably lost like 4 days of our lives between Aurora and I, like trying to make sure that these rules were good because it's this huge concern. You're bringing back this fan favorite thing. You're putting so much work into it. The entire community team is involved. It's not just like 2 people. And then you want it to be good as well. You want it to make sure that the product itself is fun and enjoyable and engageable and not just like the same 3 setups that you see over and over and over again.
Right, and
he undersells his contributions a little bit. By the way, I was super preoccupied with the technical side of making sure that things would actually work and wouldn't catch fire if we tried to run a tournament. And so he was really big on the administrative side of the tournament, which is there's a lot of moving parts, and successfully executing that and making sure everything is in the appropriate places. Very important job.
So it sounds to me like you had a strong priority towards future-proofing the Alliance tournament. It wasn't just how can we do the Alliance tournament this year. It's how can we have an Alliance tournament that regularly, going on into the future. Would you say that that's correct? That
I'm sorry.
I said that
I was looking at chat and I missed the question.
I said that, sorry, it was more of a setup. That, like, I was saying that it sounds to me like you went through this process with an eye towards future proofing. That it wasn't just how do we get the Alliance tournament back this year. It's how do we have an Alliance tournament that isn't at risk of falling apart every year. Would you say that that's accurate?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time when I was trying to figure out not just like what is the status of the Alliance tournament, but also why did it fail? Or like, why was it put on hiatus?
Right.
And so you've seen a lot of that in things like when I announced the prizes, I was also like, and we're looking, this is a heads up in a year's time. We're looking at maybe bringing back some of the older ships. That was done with an eye to, even if I can get even if it's only the community team who's supporting this tournament, I don't need anyone else. I can run it.
Nice. Yes, yeah. Okay, I see. Because like even if you can't get new ships developed, you've primed yourself to be allowed to still give away cool AT price ships, even if you get no further support.
So exactly. So with that, I can ensure that as long as I'm around and we have a community team that wants to and knows how to use the tools, like we can always have the Alliance tournament happen.
Excellent. So with that in mind, the mere act of bringing back the Alliance tournament it was a technical challenge in and of itself, enough such that in previous years, people just didn't do it. In spite of the fact that there was it wasn't like there was no desire to bring back the AT before CCP Aurora came on board. So like if it had been not a technical challenge, we probably would have had an AT. So it already is a technical challenge to bring it back. And yet I'm sure it's an even greater technical challenge to bring it back in such a way that it's future-proofed, right? That's additional design, and that's a additional thoroughness in implementation. I guess everything's fine for you to be able to write things out on paper. what was the process like to get the job done within CCP to take it from what you know needs to be done to code in code base, or at least being worked on?
That was the majority of all of that. Those late hours that I spent working on this over the last year. Really, it was super complicated.
Were you the one typing out the code?
Yes.
Oh,
yep. I've got the code
amazing.
open on the screen next to me. So I wasn't hired as a programmer, and in this position, I don't get I'm outside of the standard dev environment,
right?
And I don't get the benefit of having someone walk me through the code base and all of that sort of thing. So it was a ton of experimentation. I didn't even know how to get into the code. I needed to have someone kind of open the door for me so that I could start poking around. And it was, I managed to basically guilt someone in a bar, as the story goes, into being fine, if you really want to do this to yourself, I'll show you how. And they got me in. The software developer got me into the to Perforce, which is for anyone who's programmed, it's kind of like GitHub, that sort of thing. It's
repository
where all of our code is managed.
Yeah.
And they had to sit me down and give me this really complicated branching strategy talk about these is our sandboxes up here, and then these all go into our main development branch down here, and this is a process that takes about this long, and it'll hit singularity at this time, and all of that sort of stuff.
Right.
So it's super complicated. And a lot of the difficulty was very much just in feeling out how all of these processes worked without breaking something and getting told to go away, and B, without having the usual support that a new developer would get. So that was a little bit tricky. It was basically just me being puppy dog eyesing people a few times to be how do you do this? Please explain how one would move this into this branch, that sort of thing. So eventually I did get in, and people have been helpful now that they see that I'm not just in the machine causing issues at this point. And so I managed to get a few developers who do my code reviews. So I'll write up new Python to make updates to the tournament code or related stuff, and then I send it off to some of the software developers in Team Talos and that sort of thing, and they'll take a look at it for me and be oh yeah, this looks good, no problems here, or oh, actually you should probably just do this way, it's a better way to do this, and that's helpful. So I have that at least, and then I submit it to you. Well, and then I can submit it to the main development branch and things will happen. But it wasn't just the programming side either. A lot of it was managing Thunderdome and servers.
Right.
So I had to learn how to create a build. So I would put my code into we have this thing called Team Cities that does the builds. And so you'd submit it to Perforce, Team City does a build, and then I could take that build, and if it was successful and I didn't break anything, and I can take that build and I can put it on a test server, in this case, Thunderdome. And so I was able to write up tournament code and then put it on Thunderdome, and then we could play with it there. And I was able to run my first 2 test events, the first one of which was the 5v5s about a year ago. And so that was really cool.
Right.
It's super satisfying to be able to actually write your own code and put it on a server, and you can see the changes live in game. Super satisfying. And since then, it's just kind of been, and further understanding the whole process, particularly with regards to tranquility. So even just last week, yeah, it was only last week. So just before the second weekend of the Alliance tournament, there were some errors that the tool was kicking off, not ones that I had caused. And so I wrote up a log spam fix, and I had to learn how to do an emergency deployment in order to get that in on a patch on Thursday. And so it was just really neat going through that whole process. And at this point, I've done quite a bit, and I'm actually like we've just talked about it, and I'm getting some now set time, so I'm not like in the office super late all the time working on this stuff, where I can work on the tournament tools for just a part of my normal job. So that's super awesome.
Yeah, so that last piece is actually something I was going to ask about, but that really sets it up. Going the opposite direction, not just were you hired to bring back the tournaments, but like how much buy-in do you feel there was within the company as a whole? It sounds to me like it really was kind of the same as it was before, where it's like, well, if you want to, then you can, but we're not going to stop you. But did you get any support at all in the process of bringing it forward, besides from volunteers or whatnot? And do you feel that has changed now?
I had to prove to people that it was something that we had the capabilities of doing without massive dev support. So if it's something that we have to sell to our limited number of development teams as like, please spend the next 3 months fixing this thing and make it a feature,
right,
that's really hard. And I'm not, and that would be a struggle for me to do. Like I'm not in the business of setting development plans.
Like you can't go up there and be like, hey guys, all you have to do is rewrite the entire tool and then we'll be fine.
Yeah.
That won't work.
I mean, we would love to do that, but and there's stuff in there that I'm just going to slowly clean up and refactor over time. But the what I had to do was basically show people that I knew how to actually make I could work the whole tool. It was functional, and I was able to run an event on it. And once I was able to prove that in the Alliance Open, and then especially after the Anger Games, I was like, I now know enough that I can run this on Tranquility, and I can guarantee you it'll work. Guarantee was maybe a strong word, but I think we pulled it off in the end. And once I was able to show that we had the ability to do this technically, it was really easy to get people on board, because there was a lot of latent desire to run the event, but sometimes it just comes down to, but we can't do anything if we can't do the development resources. And so unfortunately, like, this is just not going to go anywhere. And I broke through that part of the problem, and the rest was pretty great. So now we actually have really fantastic support in the company. We've got the art team making ships, and we've got a decent Alliance tournament budget again. And so as long as we can kind of keep this going, we'll have a lot of good tournament events.
Do you feel that this AT is considered broadly a success, and therefore support has increased because of that? Or do you think it was just you winning your way up the price? Like, was the Alliance tournament considered a success by the company?
Oh, yes, very much so. Okay. It's not the only metric that we look at, but one of the things that we're looking at is like peak viewer count. And a while back, we had been on the front page of Twitch, where we had Bjorn B's stream was on the front page of Twitch for Eve. And we broke the numbers that he got in terms of like peak viewers just with the tournament, kind of just the tournament and in-game pings. And so it just really showed that it has been thus far the best we've performed on Twitch and just in general. And that was just Twitch. We also had multiple different language streams, with the Russian one nearing up over an additional 1,000. And so, we had, I think at one point we had about 9,000 people watching the Alliance tournament, which is pretty awesome.
9,000.
I'd heard, it really proved that there was like an appetite for this element of Eve to be in there again, and to have like a dedicated like community team running it. Right, the community team, people might not realize, it's now 6 members. It's quite large, and we're able to take on neat little projects. Well, neat projects, not little, like this. So like this is the culmination of a lot of things coming together. So we talked about how the Twitch chat worked. Like CCP Convict created a little bot to do, well, he oversaw the creation of the bot and actually managed to bring it to life instead of it just being like a little machine. So we could like run predictions, and we could give rewards out automatically without him like losing his arm trying to Control C, Control V like 18,000 times or whatever. So like we were able to like create not only a good product, but also like have it to be engageable and have people have fun with it, right? Because if the Alliance tournament is just like a few hundred people having fun together, that's good, right? But being able to get to thousands of players who enjoyed watching it because they could like predict on what was coming in, like just have fun with the random horrible memes of Twitch chat together, like just the ability to do that, it really provides a lot of value to the community.
I had heard that Twitch chat was capped at 4K actually, and the numbers above that were no, I'm just kidding. Moving on. So
Spacey.
so the let's jump over from like the technical side of putting it together to the development of the rules of it. So there are definitely some rules that are that were rule changes that were made. Some were controversial, some were more controversial than others. You know, very clear, and the rules, in my opinion, struck at some of the things that were big deals about the Old Alliance tournaments, namely things like striking at tinker setups and the banning of AT ships. I was very sad by that because I thought that the AT was the correct place to show off, sacrifice, kill. It created drama within the AT. And yet, you're absolutely correct. This AT was not only incredibly popular, but it was probably, I mean, certainly the most well-received AT that I have ever seen. Why don't you talk a little bit about the process of developing the rules set or the rules changes and what you think now that it's over about some of the changes that you made?
I could do a little bit like with the idea of and I think a lot of the success comes down to like the fact that Aurora and I were both like active participants in the Alliance tournament, so we actually know how these teams work and like the dynamics that make a team successful and things like that. So we kind of just the first thing when it comes to the Alliance tournament ships, they are amazingly cool to see. I loved seeing like a multiple trillion ISK fight take place once. I think it was the AT-12 finals or AT-13, where just like bling ships versus bling ships, and it was so cool. Mirachas exploding everywhere. But you have to like sit back and realize like that is horrible for someone else to try and break into, right? You pretty much set the stage that only winners can get the top prizes. Everyone else can get kind of close, but you're always fighting with your hand behind your back unless you can pony up at least 400 billion ISK in an Etana and Rabisu. Like that became the dynamic, and that is really cool for certain matches. But really, when we're kind of like bringing this back from an extended hiatus, like we don't want only the rich people to have an advantage. And it does bring an advantage for bans and like evading types of things like that. And the ships are just super strong. So we both like immediately had that as our first reaction. It was like, okay, get rid of AT ships, at least for this one. We can open the door for later, but for this one, while there's still so few AT ships out there and the price tag is so massive, we want this to be competitive for everyone, not just the top teams. And then from there, it was just kind of looking at strong setups and tweaking like here and there, and just like going back and forth saying, hey, is this good? Let's make some practice comps or like practice teams. How would we fly this? How would we design? How would we break the rules if we were captains? And in like that perspective, I think just contributed a whole lot of good to the how the rules actually worked out.
So cool. So but at the same time, towards the end, we did see a group kind of push the tinker setup regardless of your best efforts. Do you have any do you think that any of the rules that you put into play didn't work out the way that you wanted it to, or that you would think about improving?
I mean, in the case of the tinker setup, that's actually something that we wanted to be possible. It's very much just that we don't want it to be too strong. So we'd love to see people try that sort of thing. We'd love to see variety in terms of the comps that people are bringing. We're not trying to make anything just totally untenable. but there are some that can be very frustrating and just kind of overwhelming for a lot of comps if they're allowed to be a bit too strong. And Tinker's kind of one of those things. It just can be super frustrating. However, I think that match with the Tinker was just about perfect for what we're looking to see. Like, you have ships ramming to try and break them apart, and the fact that it was only flown that one time really meant that it wasn't too dominant.
Right.
And I think we hit the nail on the head in terms of just variety. I don't think I've ever seen an AT with the level of variety that we saw in this one. In terms of comps, you had almost no idea what people were going to bring from match to match, and it was pretty wild and kind of almost hard for even the vets to keep track of.
Well, so interestingly enough about that probably was not just the rules, right? I'm not going to give you that one as like, you guys made the correct choices to the AT to make it the most interesting AT ever. There's been a lot of changes to the game that has happened, and a lot of interesting things that has been implemented that we did see in play in the Alliance tournament. Everything from Triglavians and Edencom ships to that's my best examples, but I mean, like, how much has just the change of the game? Edencom ships, I think, is a huge example of something that functions almost like a hard counter towards things like drone reps, using reps for drones. Did you see the changes that has happened in Eve affect the Alliance tournament?
Oh, very much so. The biggest one, the largest factor in all of the different comps and stuff we saw this year was absolutely Surgical Strike. So Surgical Strike just totally shifted the whole Alliance tournament dynamic. Previously, you'd see a lot of talk about Kingslayer comps and that sort of thing because the Tech 2 logistic ships were so incredibly strong in that 10v10 setup that it was almost impossible to kill anything unless they really screwed up, or you needed them out, or you killed them. And so it was very much a game of who can kill the enemy logistic ship first. But since Surgical Strike happened, the reps no longer are quite as powerful due to the resistances on all of the targets being lowered, and things die a fair bit easier. And so we've seen a whole lot more variety emerge in terms of even just punching through things and ignoring the logistics being a possible strategy. And there's, that opens up new things. So if you're punching through and ignoring the logistics, like, are you using big battleship weapons? Because that means that now, you can have people sig tanking against those. And I think in general, Surgical Strike created a lot more variety for the tournament scene that was fairly healthy. It's also why we see less Tinkers, partly because the Tinker's just a little bit tougher to run without those high resists. And in terms of other changes, I know I had to update the tool for the Triglavian ships, like the Zarmaz reps were not showing in the UI. They actually weren't even showing on the first weekend because that change had gotten scooped into the release that was coming on the following Tuesday, which is why they were in game on the second weekend. So I had to make updates for that. We had to I had to go in and tell the tool, like, hey, in your list of legal logistics ships, like, please add the Triglavian Lagi, all of that sort of thing. And then the blaster changes were really big, which also came along with Surgical Strike. Like, all of the close range weapons being way more powerful was a big factor. So there's a lot that's happened that shifted the meta. Plus all of the small tweaks, like Destroyers got a decent buff. And so we had to raise Destroyers a fair few points, and Marauders and Blops got really big buffs. Like the Widow is 25 points because it was just kind of scary strong. We were really worried about that one totally dominating the matches if it was a bit too affordable. So a ton of difference since previous Alliance tournaments, most definitely.
Man, coming out with the Surgical Strike was good, actually. Thing was a bold move. We'll see how that works out. No, that's an interesting point that, like, in spite of what people can say about it, Surgical Strike by weakening some strategies. This is true in a lot of game design, right? Like by weakening one strategy that's oppressing others, kind of that allows all of the other flowers to flourish, as it were, because all of those other strategies would have been good strategies, but they are, countered by something that's overbearing on the meta, as it were. Another change or another rule that I found very interesting was that, speaking of points and adjustments of points, for this Alliance tournament, you guys specifically decided to discount the Barghest, or rather the Mordu line, because they're the sponsors this year of the tournament. Obviously a mechanical change built for lore reasons. Do you feel like that was successful? Do you feel like it caused problems? Do you think that kind of thing is going to return next year?
I personally think that was fairly successful. We pointed them very low. We could have been a little bit softer on that and just made it kind of a like, oh, if you bring this, you get an extra point sort of thing, instead of like an extra 3 points or whatever it was for the Barghest in particular. We may or may not go a little bit softer next year. We went real hard on the discount this year, but I'm a big fan of the discount, because what that does is it means that if you feel like you've reached a really nice balance point with the rules, it allows you to just still have things feel really unique year to year. So the rules are always going to get adjusted. But even if there aren't like really big meta shifting things happening, by having some ships be greatly discounted, it changes all of the arithmetic teams have to do when they're preparing their comps about like what exactly is the optimal setup here. And so in Alliance Tournament 16, that was the very cheap Triglavian ships. And that absolutely dominated the meta, and it made that tournament really unique. In this tournament, it was the really cheap Barghests and the cheap Garmers, and that made this tournament really unique. And I think next year we'll have whoever the sponsor is rooting for an ore sponsorship, because that would be hilarious. Whoever the next sponsor is will probably have discounted ships as well, because it helps to keep each front, like, it gives it really nice flavor.
And we were also like really emboldened as well by the bans, the ban system that we have in, which is new to the Alliance tournament, but not new to like the competitive scene. Whereas like both teams essentially blind ban, and if they have an overlap ban, each team gets another ban, right? So
Right.
If we enter a situation where a single ship is just way too good, or we screwed up somewhere and we just needed something to bail us out, like the teams themselves would just ban certain ships, and it wouldn't cost them anything. They wouldn't lose a ban because the other guy would also also want to ban that ship too. So we really kind of bought ourselves some liberties there to have a little bit of fun with the rules. I personally was like very fond of the Barghest being like the #1 flagship picked, because it's such like a glass cannon. Like the ship has like so few slots to tank up with and so much damage output. So many teams picked it because it's great, it's cheap, it avoids the ban, and it's versatile, as we saw it like run in armor and shield comp. But we saw so many flagships explodify, and that's kind of the point.
It really did feel like baited on a free discount, right? Like, sure, the obvious answer is flagship, the discounted thing, have a good support group, but like risk versus reward, I guess it made it so that we saw a lot. You're rewarding riskier or more aggressive tactics, which I think is better, because I think the intuitive way to treat your flagship would be to be pretty defensive about it, right? Like to be a bit more cautious with it. I would assume.
Yeah, historically the flagships have always been these like very low DPS of very high utility flagships. Like the Balgorn, for one, is almost always chosen because it's got the 72 kilometer webs, which can actually, if you abyssal roll it, which is also a new thing that we had to like kind of consider when we were doing flagships, because abyssal rolling is new to the entire thing. You could very feasibly have a Balgorn that could web the entire arena. It would be expensive to do it, but you could do it if you were like a crazy person. And that's, I don't know, that to me just strikes me as broken and unfun. That just makes you pick that every single time so you can have one as well as the other guy. We really saw a lot of diversity, even though most of the teams did pick Bargas. We did see a lot of diversity as well in the flagship picks. Like we saw one Vindicator, two Vargers, a couple Nightmares, which like people kind of theory crafted to be the counters to these types of setups. So it was really cool to see what went through these teams' minds when they were picking their flagships, and watching them explode was great. That's my favorite thing.
I wonder how much.
That was
Oh, sorry.
that was very much the reason that we went with the Barghest as a legal flagship, even with the low points, is just because we kind of agreed that it was so squishy. It would be hilarious to have a bunch of those as flagships, and we got what we wanted out of that.
Well, on top of that, I wonder how much so if there's an easy answer, if there's a obvious answer, then everybody just does that. But in absence of an obvious answer, or more importantly, with a controversial obvious answer, the question is, for those people who choose not to do that, what do you do instead? And so rather than it defaulting to like a secondary default answer, it seems more scattered, because if you're not going to do the discounted flagship, what are you going to do with your flagship? And then you're going to have multiple answers to that.
Yeah, the rules, we kind of became a little bit sadistic as well, because we pointed things that were just like tantalizingly good. Like, how do you say no to a 1-point ship with so many mid slots? Like, we made teams say no to like these like incredibly point efficient ships, and not all of them did. Some people took it too, but and same with like the logistics cruisers, like the Tech 1 logistics cruisers. They looked so good. I remember vividly a conversation with CCP Aurora going through this, where she was like, "Hey, why don't we just drop this down a point?" I'm like, "That would be busted." She goes, "Yeah, but everything else, like the teams would have to choose, do they want this or that? And it's a horrible choice." And I was like, "That's mean, but that's genius. Let's do it."
Perfect.
And we had so many conversations like that, which really goes to like paid off in the diversity of what we saw in the ships, the teams that were fielded, right? Because there were so many different comps, and a lot of them seemed viable. There's never this situation where you had this one killer comp that like you could fly over and over and over again, right? Like the teams that execute really well historically always just showed one team for the first couple of matches, because they could just outpilot everyone and it was very strong and could beat everything. Teams didn't have that option. They had to swap around. They had to make new choices. They had to be able to beat certain other teams. They had to be creative with their bands. Like, it was just a really, really great dynamic.
Also, one of the things I just realized that we didn't see a lot of, I don't think, I will admit, I haven't actually watched every single match yet, because I was pretty busy over the weekends, but I did manage to catch a lot of the bigger ones. Either way, one thing I didn't see very much was undersized teams. These, with a ship that costs only 1 point, why wouldn't you fill out your full team? Was that part of the calculus? Because I know that undersized teams were always kind of meh.
So I think we saw some undersized teams in the feeders, where the entry fee was essentially 0. But for AT-17 in the main event, I don't think we saw a single undersized team. I think a lot of it is just like you get so much utility from like a 1-point setup,
right,
or a 1-point ship, or so much utility just from having that 10th person, that the teams who were like involved, like the teams that were involved were highly competitive, from like the team that finished 40th all the way to the top. So I think they know better than to take an undermanned setup, just because you get so much more out of it.
Yeah, and just based on that, I would imagine that likely the people who came with an undersized comp may not have had like enough a big enough team to draw from, maybe. But either way,
there's one other thing that I want to butt in and talk about.
Sure,
that
go
I really
for it.
liked. That actually probably does play into this a little bit, that you touched on, is we added this thing called the Mercenary Rule, and it was cool because the Mordu Legion are also mercenaries, so that's a neat little tie-in. but essentially it means that if your alliance isn't participating, you could be on any team as long as the team captain says, yeah, okay, this guy's good to go, and you register as well. So we had a very specific process for registering, but you could just have anyone be on your team. And so like teams that couldn't necessarily field a full squad, they could always just pick up a mercenary. Or if a player was really interested in competing, but he didn't have 30 of his closest friends who were willing to put in 40 hours a week for this ridiculous little competition, like they could find a team as well without like uprooting themselves on tranquility and moving away from their like social groups and stuff like that. And that played really well into certain teams. Like I think the best example is Platinum Sensitivity, which is just like an amalgamation of several groups on TQ. They came together for this one purpose, and they had an amazing run. They kind of came out of nowhere, and they were like my favorite little story. And they existed literally only because this mercenary rule allowed them to play.
Boundary Experts as well is another great example of basically just a team of mercenaries. But I think, and this is kind of funny, like I'm a big fan of how well the Mercenary Rule worked, but I just particularly love that we brought this out when it was a Mordu's Legion sponsored tournament, because that was so fitting.
Speaking of it being a Mordu Legion tournament, how bad do you feel for missing the opportunity of giving out really fancy hats for watching the Alliance tournament in honor of Mordu and his really fancy hats?
That is a massively missed opportunity.
Sorry, I didn't think about it until now either. Okay, so I do want to circle back a little bit on the ban thing. To clarify, it used to be that it was like one team bans one, then the other team bans one, back and forth. Kind of like a lot of MOBAs do it that way, especially when it's automated. And then what it's moved into is both teams submit their bans, and with the idea that if both of them submit the same ban, that becomes neutralized. It's still banned, but now both teams get to pick another ban to add to the list. Is that correct?
Yep, that's about it. I've taken to call it a cascading blind ban system.
So do you feel, let's circle back a little bit about how effective that was. I know that like the execution of the Alliance tournament itself, the actual act of moving people through the steps and processes and keeping it on track, is very challenging. This year was pretty darn smooth. This process, if I remember from my conversation with Rix, the banning was happening a little bit earlier than you would have expected from previous years. Is this part of an overall streamlining effort to make sure that the trains go on time? And how effective was that?
It was, so this kind of came out of a couple things. The original ban system that was previously used in the Alliance tournament was both teams would just you would trade bans back and forth, and it was really, really fast. And it was stressful, and it wasn't particularly satisfying in some ways. So I'm a big fan of this new ban system because it removes a little bit of the pressure off of the teams at the start. They kind of just go in with a list of ships that they want banned, and then they can throw some additional ones on top of it. But the other thing that I liked is that it fixes the blind ban, just the pure blind ban issue of if there's a couple really strong ships in the meta that nobody really wants to see, then you can have those, both teams wind up banning those, and then you wind up with just less ships banned, which actually creates less variety. So for every ship you have banned, there's a little bit more variety because the banned ships are always, they tend to be the really strong ones that are really dominant in whatever the meta is. So by adding in some more ships that you can't take, it creates more variety because it kind of pushes people to think a little bit more outside of the box. And so this fixes the problem of having less than 3 bans if you were just doing a blind ban system, or just 3 bans if you're doing a blind ban system. It makes sure that you always have at least 6, and it even flexes so you can have up to 9. And even better yet is that it helps to maintain a little bit of the mind games of the ban system. So if it was just a pure blind ban system, there's no psychology involved, which is kind of unfun. There was in the previous system a lot of psychology involved. So by doing the blind ban system this way, you have them both each submit their things, and with that first ban set, they're kind of broadcasting to the other team like, these are the things that I don't want to see. What do you think that means that I might want to fly? And there's kind of all of this psychology that's happening. And then if there's additional bans that come out of it, then you also have this additional like mind game thing, and where it's like, all right, so how do we mislead them about what we're looking for, and how do we make sure that we can push them into this comp that we would prefer to see them in, all of that sort of thing. So I'm overall incredibly happy with this as a system of bans, even to the point of considering like, what if it was 4? Not settled yet. If you're in a tournament team, please don't freak out about that.
Well, that could have cascading effects, right? Because every one that you add increases the chance that 2 people will ban the same one, therefore getting additional bans. Therefore, it could compound on itself the difference between 3 and 4 could be significant is all I'm saying. And I would actually disagree that like there isn't the psychology involved in the other way, because so like I'm having to set up my 3 bans. I know that if what I ban is popular enough that they ban it too, that I get a bonus ban. Therefore, I can feel comfortable just banning whatever I want to, knowing that if it is the popular one, I just get it back. In fact, banning the popular one might be the one I want, just so that way I get 4 bans instead. Whereas in the other way, I actually might not want to ban the popular ban if I think that you're going to ban it, so that way I can use my 3 bans on 3 different things, not waste one, and you'll ban the thing that I'm trying to ban. So there is psychology either way.
But if both of them think the same way, then you wind up with the thing unbanned, and then they're both like, well, I guess I have to use it because we left the really strong thing open, which is kind of the way that the Bargas worked out this year.
Yeah, it really depends on where you want the prisoner's dilemma to fall. And it sounds like by default, you want, if it's not good, you want it banned. Or if they don't want it, you want it banned, as opposed to like them accidentally not banning it because they bet on you banning it. Yeah, that makes sense.
I also want to point out that the previous incarnation of the ban system was awful in just like for practicality purposes, because very few people experience this type of hell in Eve. Before your match starts, you get this little dialogue that pops up. There's a red 60, and it starts counting down. And then in there is drop-down boxes with every ship in the game that you have to then like sort through, including like Imperial issue Armageddon, Gold Magnate, like ships that are illegal in the Alliance tournament are still in that thing. So you have to like, and it led to this situation where teams would just panic so much they would just start banning out like predetermined things. Like, I don't care what the other guy banned. I'm always going to ban this, that, and that.
Do you want
a horrible like experience?
Do you want to ban the Pontifex or the Prime?
Yeah, exactly. And like shit like that would happen.
Careful.
And you had so many situations where experienced team captains that had won the Alliance tournament before, would just flat out miss a ban because they either panicked too much, overthought it too much, and couldn't find the ship, or stuff like that. So on top of just like the interesting different mind games that go on with it, and the ability to like be a little bit more liberal with the rules and stuff like that. It's just such a much better user experience. And one thing that we also kind of missed a little bit is because this tournament was a little bit more popular than we anticipated. We are very happy with this, by the way. CCP Aurora ended up expanding the tournament from 32 teams in the main event to 40 teams in the main event to help facilitate those teams that came through the feeders. And in so doing, like the first 2 weekends, the match cadence was the fastest it's ever been for a competitive EVE esport ever. And the fact that the EVNT team and the entire community team, the GMs, everyone that was doing the reffing stuff, the fact that we were able to stay on schedule for that day was just astounding to us.
Like clockwork. It was really well done. Running these kinds of things.
I just wanted to give a shout out to General Stargazer, who I gave the title of head referee this year. He was an absolute hero in making sure that all of the referees were organized and the teams were ready on time and in the field when we were supposed to start. So, absolute hero, that guy.
So you mentioned that there's a bunch of extra teams. Yeah, you guys did such a great job with the production this year. The live productions are so hard. You know, every little mistake gets pointed out. You guys did a great job in the execution of it. You all should be very, very proud. Shoot, what was I about to say? Oh yeah, so you did end up with more teams than you thought before. One of the comments that one of the feedback that I said a lot, especially after the first weekend, was that I really wish that we spent less time digging into extremely like low level knowledge of like Eve mechanics and more time investing in knowledge about like what is going on, these people, etc. Now, towards the end, you start having like at least some infographics about the different teams and whatnot. But like, how much prep work was done with the teams and with the commentators to prepare people to have interesting things to talk about?
So I have a somewhat funny story about this that's mostly related. I watched your interview with Rick Stavix just before the second weekend. And on that Thursday, I was like, we're gonna do like full bios of every group that's still in the tournament, because that sounds awesome. And so it was something that we had kind of discussed before, but it had kind of gotten lost in the shuffle of just, making sure that the core tournament was going to happen. And so I was like, all right, let's do this. CCP Alpha had collected a spreadsheet of like descriptions of all of the alliances, where it's like describe your alliance. And so I went into the sheet and I'm like, I'm going to start adding this. We're going to have a special screen with like the background of these people, like where do they live in space? What sort of activities do they do? All of that sort of thing. And I was super hyped. And then I spent about 2 hours working my way through this sheet. And I'm like, this is slightly harder than I thought. And then I just kind of realized, like, wait a second. These are all memes. There's not a single accurate description here. Every single alliance description was a meme. And I had no useful information, and it was incredibly difficult. It's actually surprisingly difficult to be like, boundary experts, like, who exactly are these people? It's hard to give a useful description to people. And so it's something that I'm definitely going to have to put a lot more effort to next year and make sure that we basically give captains a spreadsheet that's harder to put memes into, so that we can extract more useful information and tell people about these groups. But yeah, that is my relevant story.
I mean,
It's memes all the way down.
Yeah. Well, so this is actually something that I've been musing a lot about with when it comes to like the CSM and stuff, like the elections. It almost feels like there needs to be a higher standard for these very public things that players take part in, that there needs to be a higher standard of buy-in from those who participate, right? It isn't just a willingness to pay enough ISK and show up to the tournaments. You also have to be willing to make a serious, bio or, a 30-second snippet or whatever. Like, and you can even get support or whatever. But like, if you're running for the CSM, or if you're a team if you're legitimately wanting us to take you seriously, maybe they need to be forced to take it more seriously themselves.
I think a part of it, though, if you want to be a successful team, if you're not like Hydra, Vidra, Volta, Templates, like if you're not the Giga top team, you want to go in there with like as small a target on your back as possible. You want to be the little surprise upset guy, not the, this guy has so much pedigree. So there is like a gameplay reason why you want to obfuscate who you are and like what you do in the game.
Sure, they might want to.
To the credit of the EVNT team, they did come up with just a massive dossier. Like I know Sutonia worked on it, Jintan worked on it as well. of all these teams. But at least for the first weekend, there was a bit of a time constraint as we had like the increased match cadence, like for who these guys are and where they're from and stuff like that. But I kind of like the idea where like, oh, I don't really know who these people are. Like I'm not quite sure where they're from. Like, oh, I recognize these names because for the competitors, they can like just have this added value of having knowledge of these like random people or these like tournament pros, or be like, oh, I know that Annie Gardet's going to always be flying this like huge support ship or huge DPS ship. Or I know that TikTok is going to be in this linchpin setup. Like, so it kind of adds a little bit of depth to the tournament knowledge and lets a little bit of that kind of stick around.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe I'm just like an old Alliance tournament person where I feel like this is the stuff that I know, so like, it must provide value somewhere. Otherwise, what am I worth? So that is entirely possible too.
And maybe this is something, it was better on the final weekend, and maybe this is something that is for the final weekend. I know that like one of the things that I would have thought would have been useful is like just random facts on flashcards for the people in the booth. So that way they just have things to refer to as they're commentating about the different guys or something like that. Just feed them useful information.
They did have some of that, actually. If you looked on the desk in front of like Laz when he was there was usually an iPad. That was his list of notes about each team and each matchup and all of that sort of thing. So they had some of that.
Well, good. You should do that.
There's a bunch of like prep work.
Awesome. But also not just like making sure that the commentators know what to say. One of the things I really felt was missing was interviews with like team captains after the fact, right? In the in-between times. It could have been nice to get some reactions from both winners and losers. Is there a technical reason why that can't be done, or did it just not come up?
First weekend, it was mostly time pressure. So with the 15-minute matches, like the time in the desk was already super short. So we weren't really able to fit in anyone there. Second weekend, I think it's just slightly a missed opportunity. We should have included more. We should have gone and like pulled people on. I think we were so preoccupied with the making sure that all of the studio setup was good that we didn't really go and pull people from like, pull captains from previous stuff, because it would have added additional overhead that would have complicated things, like making sure they get onto the right comms in order to speak with us and all of that sort of thing. Yeah. So definitely something that is on my list for an improvement next year. Also, to answer a question in chat, what was the green drink that Suetonia had? It was one of these. This was the green drink, and when it was green and pink, it was just two of these mixed, which is why it actually tasted quite good.
I just want to chime in one thing for the captain's interview type thing. There is another like small element where it's very popular for the players and the viewers, which is super important for a good production, but it is horrifically unpopular for the captains, because they're like, the last thing I want to do is talk to a bunch of normies. I just want to like figure out what I'm going to fly next, or I just want to commiserate with my team because I've been eliminated and stuff like that. So we definitely do need to find the right balance of content to add in there that the teams are happy to provide, and that we could be like, that the viewers would also find interesting. Because I'd love, my favorite part of the Alliance tournament is, well, my third favorite part of the Alliance tournament probably is the like AARs after the fact,
right?
Where like the Alliance tournament is over and you have just these team captains doing a brain dump of all the giga cool stuff that they thought of and they planned for, and you're like, holy shit, I didn't realize how complicated this was, because it is really hard to convey just how much effort and practice and thought goes into these teams.
Right.
Like you just see like, oh, there's 3 Abaddons, 3 Oracles. They just wanted a lot of DPS. But like someone had to think of that. And the cool part is a bunch of people thought about that and just came up with it. And then someone came up with a counter to that. And someone came up with a counter to that. And they like meticulously planned when they wanted to show this off and who would copy it and stuff like that. It just absolutely phenomenal how deep this goes.
Absolutely. On the topic of interviews though, and I didn't warn you guys about this one, so you can dodge it if you want to, but we saw the ghost of AT Past showed up. Seedsaplenty bro himself. I guess first of all, going back a little bit to the technical challenges, you mentioned that Seedsaplenty, I think you mentioned that Seedsaplenty bro helped you out throughout this process. It was also mentioned that Seedsaplenty bro lives in the area. Bring Logi bro back. Like what? Anyway, it was good to see him.
He has a new job that he is quite happy with. It is not my decision to pull him back. But yeah, it was, he actually, so I haven't been in like deep contact with him through this whole process. I did that bar story I told you about when I first got access to the code. He was actually there. There's this really funny situation where the software developer I was talking to was basically like, hey, Ben, get a load of this. Like, guess what she wants to do? And they both had a good laugh over it before they were like, all right, fine, we'll help you. And like, I got Logi Bro's email in case like I had simple questions and that sort of thing. So I had a little bit of support, but I didn't reach out to him too much. I try not to get too much labor out of people who aren't actively working for the company. But there was a small issue with when we moved things to Tranquility. Like I had very little testing time, and I was like, this new problem's emerged because it's a live server and I'm not sure what's going on. And he was like, oh, we fixed it by doing this thing that I've never had to do on Thunderdome before. So it was just kind of this one-off, like unique issue that popped up when we moved to Tranquility. And since I was already chatting with him that morning, he was just like, this is how it's done. And so that was super useful.
Awesome. Yeah, it was good to see him either way. And it's honestly, it's good to know that he's there and, you know, everything's happy, no hard feelings, everything's good still. And he's there if we truly need it. Logi bro is still there for us, which is very comforting, to be totally frank.
In our time of greatest need.
Exactly. Like in case of emergency, break glass. Got it.
And there is still, I get the sense that there is also some love there as well for just the whole tournament thing, because how would you not love it? But we had like an internal viewing party for the feeders, and CC Beers could bring a guest and stuff like that. And Seedsaplenty bro like did show up there, and that was my first time seeing him since I'd been to Reykjavik, and I was like just so happy to see him again, because it did bring back like a lot of really, really happy memories.
Yeah, we need to make sure that he makes more appearances. Like I said, it's just good to see him still involved with everything. But jumping topics slightly from like the behind the scenes of the actual execution to the forefront, you mentioned that there was the bot earlier, but one of my biggest concerns when it came to bringing back the AT was the removal of Eve bet, right? The Alliance tournament and betting on it with ISK like has gone hand in hand the entire time that I played Eve. And so, you know, while the removal of casinos were or player casinos was a necessary evil at best, I guess you could say, for the good of the game, it did leave a big concern because, you know, betting on tournaments is a good way to get buy-in from the viewers. It's a good way to make it exciting. But what you guys did was you bet on the tournaments by anteing channel points, which was earned over time otherwise. And then you could redeem that for the Galnet skins, which I had actually complained about previously, that you guys have been giving them out far too rarely for what they were. But now, like, the value of it being 10K points, like, it kind of makes sense. So it was brought up like, well, why don't you guys build an in-game tool for the gambling and all that, or for the betting and stuff like that? But really, this system was elegant because it was built in, right? You were using all pre-existing systems, the channel points, you know, all that sort of stuff. So talk a little bit about that side of things, the actual betting, the skins, the setup of the betting process of that.
So
I was going to just say we had this bit of a secret weapon because you mentioned EveBet. We have CCP Convict, who was one of the like head honchos over at EveBet. So when it came to like engagement for people watching and like ideas for that, we could just tap into that giant head and just like like just pull out all of his good ideas. So that was like incredibly helpful. Like you kind of poked fun at it a little bit or like made light of it, but it does kind of feel in a way that the people picked for these community positions were like kind of the A team for the Alliance Hornet just by happenstance and by accident, because there's just so many like talented people in like different areas that just work well together.
Yeah, the channel points in particular, like they're so, from our perspective, they're such a fantastic solution, because what we're trying to do with the Alliance tournament and with streaming in general is just keep people engaged with Eve. And so with the channel points, you have this engagement where we're rewarding people for watching our streams, which is wonderful. More people watching our streams means we have, more eyes on Eve just generally, and then they can get cool stuff for that, and that's just great. Like that's community management, like 101, easiest win ever, sort of thing. The nice thing about having the betting to go along with it, with the channel points is, I mean, nobody's spending real money. Like it removes a lot of like any possible moral concern. But the you're basically taking people's time watched as a sort of like a currency,
Right.
and
You're rewarding.
You're letting them.
Sorry.
Yeah. So by letting them bet, it's causing them to like start to evaluate the teams and watch the matches real closely and pay attention to the meta. Like anyone who even thinks that they're just there for the skins or the betting, like by necessity has to also get into the Alliance tournament, which is a really cool thing to get into for those who haven't done it before. And so it helps to draw in new people who, hopefully will get attached to this tournament like we have, because it's a really fun thing. Even if in the end they tell themselves like, we're just there for the skins, like, yeah. But in order to bet for the skins, you need to kind of pay a bunch of attention to what's going on. And that's super attractive. And we kind of hope that we can just use this to continuously grow engagement around this thing. And we're looking at, other new and novel ways that we could help to grow this sort of audience engagement with tournaments or just in streams in general.
Yeah.
It also helps us to define like the story as well, right? Because like having you say something is an upset, if just like some guy says, oh, this one team was favored because I know the teams and like it should be like 60-40 or something like that. Like when you see the Twitch channel points like 90-10 and the 10% team wins and you're like, holy shit, okay, that was an upset. And if you don't have like a dog in the race or anything like that, if you don't have a team that's in the tournament, then I know a lot of people just like, hey, I want this underdog to win. Like it becomes like a more fascinating story, and it kind of engrosses like the viewer just that much more.
Plus the chat can then engage with each other based on like, anytime that happens, there's people complaining that they lost. There's people celebrating the fact that they won so big. And there's probably at least a few people that are actively gloating it that they were that much more right than 90% of the population. So that does make it really fun. I think that using channel points is actually more successful than ISK because, using ISK for your gambling would just reward your playtime, activity, and success in Eve, which is, good. But ultimately rewarding and not monetizing, but rewarding participation in the stream is like it not only is rewarding the behavior that you're targeting at that point, but it also sets everybody at a relatively neutral state, right? Like it doesn't matter if you have a trillion ISK in Eve. If you don't have the channel points, fuck you, you're not getting a skin. And And also it rewards people. Like I got a skin and I'm terrible at all these bets and I don't make big tip bets. So I didn't win anything to get 10K, but I basically already had 10K from like just watching CCP streams and just never spending my channel points. So is this something that will be ongoing? Is this do you feel like you've stumbled upon something when it comes to engagement in things like future Eve or CCP streams?
I mean, yes, we're definitely, this isn't going away anytime soon. And it may or may not, like the gambling might be more used for just tournaments. It's possible that we find other uses for it, but I think the prediction thing is very much, like very clearly something that works just super well for the tournaments. But anyone can still go to the channel and earn those channel points and get some cool rewards in game, which is awesome. And speaking of the cool rewards, I just want to give a shout out. He's in chat right now to Lumacode. He is the person who wrote the bot that is delivering all of the skins to everyone. And he also wrote the Twitch to Eve bot where you can register your in-game name. So absolute hero, that guy, for sticking with CCP Convict and letting us actually get those skin redemptions out over the weekend. So many thanks.
Yes, shout out for both, not only the Alliance tournament, but just Twitch Eve streamers et al. You know, the use of this bot has become almost ubiquitous among Eve streamers for good reason. And it was actually noted that like you guys didn't develop your own tools. You literally used a third-party app that had already been developed, and you're like, you know what? We don't need to reinvent that. We're just going to use the thing that everyone else is using, which in a way highlights and celebrates that. And I really appreciate that.
I feel like that's a weird advantage that we have as the community team. We're in touch with the community to such a degree that we're more knowledgeable about the different types of resources that exist and what the players use, but also we're just more willing to use them. So a lot of the times internally, there'll be a discussion about like, we want to do this thing, but it would take, this much development time. And sometimes we're like, yeah, but we know a guy who already does basically this. And that is just a huge benefit for us. And it's really great to be able to work with a community like that.
All right. Well, it also has been, it's already been an hour and a half. I do want to talk a little bit more about like your community management side of things, not just the AT. So A, is there anything else that we want to talk about the AT before we close up that subject? And B, do you think that you guys could stay long enough to discuss a few other miscellaneous community management stuff?
I think we can do another, I can do another half hour. I don't know about Swift.
Yeah, sure, why not? The only thing that I wanted to end with the Alliance Tournament on is just a huge shout out to Hydra Reloaded, who actually won. Congratulations. And if you go to Monarch, the system that Ash is in right now, CCP, or rather Team Raw, already put down the monument for like commemorating their win. When this whole thing was designed, they intentionally made it so that it can be added onto. So Hydra Reloaded, they get their little spot in there. Congratulations to them.
Yeah, spoilers, Swift. Gosh. No,
shit. Well, don't go to Monarch.
I'm just kidding. No, that being said, I actually made sure to go back and watch the finals today to make sure I had at least watched that one for sure before we chatted. And knowing the winners, still worth watching. Just going to throw that out there. All right. So one of the things I wanted to chat about is, you mentioned that kind of this dream team, community team has risen up. And we did mention Logi Bro, who was a member of kind of an older, a previous iteration of the Eve community team. And to be quite frank, the Eve community team kind of goes through this cycle all the way back to like the Summer of Rage, where a lot of them were let go and then like new ones rose up. And then some of them, there was another kind of low time where a lot of the community team left. And then you guys have kind of stood in. I think I didn't miss any iterations there, but like, so the community team has gone through evolutions and iterations over time. And this newer community team kind of comes circa like 2018, 2019 or so, that you guys have been building towards. Am I wrong about all of that's like vaguely correct, right? No corrections need to be made?
I have about the same understanding as you, since that was before my time.
Fair
It
enough.
Sounds vaguely correct.
So, but this community team, like, at least outwardly, are rock stars. There is clearly a renewed focus of putting out good quality content to the community, including, as you mentioned earlier, the Eve Academy that you put together, which is a very well constructed website, if I may do say so myself. There's the Beat.
Recently got updated, by the way.
Yes, recently got updated with the new videos and new stuff. There's the Beat, which is like a semi-regular, like almost like newsletter. There's the Pulse, which is kind of the newest iteration of like their regular video update. And then you also have things like the Alliance tournament. And I remember during the summer when, like, especially when the Pulse went on break, everything was really pointing to this fall, right? The AT was coming this fall. Pulse is coming back this fall. It really feels like there's been kind of like, there's a prep time. And then now that we're in the fall, it's like go time. Like you guys have been working towards like, okay, well, we're going to reboot our social media strategy. And we're now past the starting line. Is that accurate? Or how would you say, how would you correct me, I guess, if not?
I mean, it's not inaccurate. We've been, we hired Swift here, and there's some onboarding time, and we have plans about how we want to make the best use of the additional manpower. And so that kind of, flowed into the fall. So there was an extra push that happened then because we were more at full strength. And then there's, I think some of what you're seeing with the push in the fall is just kind of the natural Icelandic summer effect, where everybody's on vacation, and then they come back and we're like, all right, we're going to do cool stuff in the fall. So there's a little bit of that in play there as well. But with some of this, like the Alliance tournament happening in the fall, that was purely coincidental. That was basically just the time that worked best for me when I was trying to figure out, like, all right, what's a reasonable time period for me to make this happen, given what I know of the process. And I was like, throw a dart, hit November. I'm like, here's good, right before my birthday. That will be perfect.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so it's kind of a mix of things, but it does make for a very interesting December. As for the Eve Academy stuff, that's not entirely us. I do write some of the scripts. So if you listen to any of the Eve Academy videos, like a lot of the words that were given to the voice actors are things that I've written, but the site itself is really maintained more by it's actually a collection of people. There's not really that one's harder to describe. It's like myself and some copywriters and the web team and a project manager. Like it's an amalgamation of people who make that site come together.
Nice. Yes.
Yeah, I think the.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say that the neat thing about the community team is that like our fingers are in like a lot of pies. So if there's like a project going on that even has like a little bit of community facing stuff in there, we kind of like sneak in there and like lend some expertise where available or where needed. Like not always needed but we still like to butt in. At least I do, anyways. And so like there's a lot of like just random elements where we kind of have a little bit of say where you might not expect it to have it in there. So that whole thing was like very illuminating for me because it's not something I necessarily expected, but it is really, really, really rewarding.
Sorry, I'm going to have to bounce back to the Alliance tournament thing because I even wrote down a question that was asked in chat to make sure I asked it, and then I didn't ask it. So I want to ask the two of you guys, what was your favorite comp that you saw, and what was the most surprising comp that you saw during the Alliance tournament?
My favorite comp was the All Sanchez comp that Hydra pulled. It was just like Nightmares, Phantasms, all armor tanked, all with tracking disruptors as like an answer to this Abaddon Oracle comp, which is what they expected. I thought that was the coolest shit in the world. I've never seen an All Sanchez comp work. Like sig tanking and just like mass TDs on control. That's right up my alley. I think that's the coolest thing in the world.
That I might be sharing the opinion on that one, because I just really love the Sancha ships. I've been flying a succubus a lot on Tranquility, just because it's a succubus. Like, it's super fun. It's spooky. I just lost probably like a 2 billion-esque succubus the other day. Thankfully, it's all abyssal, so nobody knows how expensive it was.
That's my
I
favorite
managed
part.
to extract the snake pod. Yeah, that was a super cool comp. And when that one came out, like in chat, I was like, did they forget this isn't a TQ ESS, which is kind of a joke about the fact that Hydra lately on Tranquility has been they've put out a few videos where they've been raiding ESSs and fighting Marauder fleets and stuff with a very similar looking comp, usually a Balgorn, some Nightmares and Phantasms. So that was just, it was kind of neat to see them bring something that they had clearly heavily practiced on TQ. And
Yeah, when you're good at flying it, you might as well go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Any super surprising comps, or does that also qualify?
The most surprising comp was definitely the triple scorpion comp that we saw Tishy bring. Nobody knows what the heck they were doing, and it didn't work, but I almost wish it did, because that was just so wild.
Yeah, that one was absolutely nuts. I'm sure that like the thing is, like, outwardly you could like dismiss it and be like, oh, it didn't work, it must be bad. There are definitely scenarios where that thing works, like that you don't accidentally go into the spot where Tissue did, where you win that many matches like and beat good teams. Like they had a plan for it, and it just unfortunately didn't it didn't play out the exact way that they had planned. One of the setups that I was really surprised by, that it wasn't bad, I was just shocked that it was actually still viable, was like the Balgorn Vindicator combo. The double core for those two battleships that was hugely popular in Alliance Tournament 11. But like the game changed, the points changed, the format changed. Like I didn't think that was viable, and the team showed that it was really, really good.
Yeah. But one thing that didn't change was that the Vindicator's really, really strong.
Yeah, it feels so good to be a Vindicator that can just fly unchecked. It's like the best feeling in all of EVE, I feel, is just fly into this thing that can just pick and choose 90% web something and just blast her in the face. It's just I don't know. It's like this visceral, amazing feeling.
Very cool. All right, now jumping back to the community management side of things. Going back to kind of how the community team works now. So we've got you guys, we've got CCP Dopamine, we've got CCP Convict, and I believe at least one person else that I'm not thinking of.
We have Fleabix and Paragon, who is super new.
There you go. So how much do you guys work as like a cohesive unit? How much of you is it like each one of you guys deal with your own thing? Like, how does the community team work now?
Yes.
So we do work. It's a bit of a mess.
I wasn't suggesting you didn't.
Yeah, I know. We do have a few people who have kind of specialties, and so like CCP Fleabix is kind of the main point of contact for a lot of the player or the meetup groups and that sort of thing. And CCP Convict is the person in charge of CCP TV. I'm the person who's been like put in charge of tournament stuff. CCP Swift is the one who developed the community beat. Like we have different areas of specialization to some degree, but there's a bunch of tasks that get passed around each week. So we have a big sentiment report that we do very regularly, which goes to the top level management in the company. where we go around all over the community to collect feedback, truly all over. Like wherever you think we might see a message, we probably have seen it, and we kind of take the temperature of the community on different things. We note the pain points and the things they like, and then we compile it all up into this nice shiny report, which we show to your upper management. And we be like, this is what the community liked. This is what they didn't like. This is why. This is the situation. Like, or this portion of players like this, but this type of player was more prone to like have a pain point with this. All of that sort of thing. So that's an important part of our job. That gets passed around each week, so it's a different person running that report. Then we also have like who's writing the community beat this week. That's an important one. We have somebody who's on call, so that would be like if tranquility goes down or something like that, we need somebody to be able to like answer the phone, and we don't tend to put them on any other tasks when they're on that. So there's a few rotating things that get handed around in order to just kind of spread the load.
Very cool. Yeah. Okay, so that does help me understand kind of how things works, and all I know is that you guys have become very effective as a community team. Each community team is kind of like designed for the era at the time, and the production value and just the productions themselves that you guys have been producing is I'm very pleased with overall, but definitely an improvement for sure. That being said, I do want to talk a little bit. This is more so for like CCP convicts, but with you guys as well, being interested in tournaments, being interested in, community gatherings and stuff like that. I'm sure coming on board right as the pandemic was starting to shatter everyone's hopes and dreams for, any kind of community kind of gatherings and stuff like that last year and even this year. How has that been to adjust to overall, both as somebody coming onto this new company, moving to a new country, doing all this stuff during the middle of it, and also as a manager of a global community team? How has that influenced things, or how's that been?
I can hop in real quick. So,
I didn't know that was going to be the hard one. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I think there's just like a lot there, so we're trying to figure out where to start.
Sure.
So just from my perspective, like moving from the U.S. to Iceland during COVID, like during the entire pandemic, was a bit of a challenge. It took me a little bit longer than expected. I was stuck remote for a lot longer than I normally would have been. Luckily, like CSP as a company, like adapted very well to the like hybrid work style where most people were working remote anyways. So my integration was super easy from that aspect. Just physically getting over here proved to be a little bit more challenging. And then just not being able to like go to Eve meets was also like a little weird because that's always been something that I've loved when it comes to it. Like my very first time going to an Eve meet, it was like just a corporation / alliance meet. And I was hesitant to go because that was like Eve at the time wasn't my identity. I played Eve online. I loved the people I played with, but I was like, I'm not the type of person to go to a convention for something. There was like a little bit of a social stigma around it. We're talking about 12, 13 years ago. So I was like, I don't know. But I talked to these people all the time. A few people were coming in from out of town, notably Gobbins and Shidoo. And I was like, well, worst case, these guys don't know what I look like. They only know what I sound like. If I show up and it's like really weird, I'm just going to leave. And so what ended up happening is I showed up at this Eve meet and I hit it off instantly. We didn't talk about Eve. Like we did a little bit maybe, but we talked about other stuff and we just clicked. Everything just clicked. And it was like, wow. That was like my realization that the friends that I had made online were also real friends, which for some reason surprised me. And so from that point on, I was like, I'm going to every Eve meet that I physically can. So I went to every FanFest after that. I went to every Eve Vegas after that. And so like removing that from my life for 2 years was a little weird because that was just like a huge part of my social interaction with these like people that I'd become friends with, and even people that I had never like, even people that weren't in my corp, like Eve people, I still feel are my people in a way.
Right. And so I do also want to say, I meant to say this earlier, but I might as well say it now. I really do appreciate you guys, coming on, being willing to come on during this time to talk about all this sort of stuff. I intentionally am avoiding the current events or current community events, I should say, simply because, trying to pressure you guys to speak on this now before you're prepared is not something that I'm going, like, it's worth more to me to be able to chat with you about these things that we wanted to talk about than to force you or try to trick you or into putting yourself into a compromising position with your own company. So that's one of the reasons why we aren't even addressing that at all. But that being said, one of the things that is happening is overall communication. CCP has had issues in the past communicating things, but one of the good ways that we get a look behind the curtain and a look to the future is through events, FanFest, Vegas, etc. And it really seems like that's almost the thing that CCP has struggled the most about during the pandemic is like, how do we continue to put out the kind of information that we would put out in things like panels if we're not doing live events? Can you guys speak to that at all?
I think we came to that realization, like it really hit us in July when we put out, like, as we were crafting like July blog that went out. I think it's called just the July blog. I don't even know what title it had. But that's like really when that sort of hit us that like, hey, we kind of know what the future looks like. And you usually know what the future looks like because we answer this stuff at FanFest or at player meets.
Right.
But in the absence of that, like, there is just like this dearth of knowledge where the players don't necessarily see the full picture. So that's why the July blog tried to answer some of those questions, and we tried to make that style of blog a little bit more regular as well. Like I know there's going to be a winter one coming. I don't know exactly when it's coming, but it will be coming soon with like similar themes and similar like kind of broader looks and deeper looks as to what's coming for EVE Online and what the future of EVE Online holds. Because this is something that's like, it's very dear to people. Like, it's dear to me, and I'm an EVE Online player. It's dear to CCP Aurora. Like, we are all EVE Online players in the community team. So, like, a lot of the concerns that you guys have are something that we've picked up on, we know about, or we, like, experience as well. So we want to try and give answers there.
Yeah.
Or at least some insights.
The thing though with that dev blog, while it can be valuable, it almost doesn't matter because, just the mere process of going through and refining and deciding what goes into the dev blog in a certain way almost undermines the value in this regard. Ultimately, one of the big things about these kinds of like EVE FanFest presentations isn't the bullet points that you go on stage to talk about in your presentation. It's, when we get you on stage for 2-3 hours and bombard people with questions and panels, that's when a lot of the real stuff, or at least the stuff that people walk away with confidence, I feel comes from. And a dev blog just is never going to capture that because it's always going to feel prepared.
Yeah, and there's also a huge value to like these random little conversations that you have just in passing. Like, oh, you walk by CCP Fozzie and you just chat with him because he loves talking about EVE. He'll chat with you for a little while and you're like, oh, okay, so like that's like a little piece of information that I now have as an EVE player. And you might be thinking, well, there's only a few people that go to FanFest, right? It's not like every single player goes there. But these players that are like in their communities, they go back to like the groups that they came from when they returned from Iceland and they recover from the flu or whatever. They like disseminate this information organically. They say, hey, I had a conversation with this guy. He said this. And it becomes like the players get this like organic experience where they get like this extra knowledge that we pass on to them. And it took us a little while to appreciate like that's the dynamic that was going on and that we've kind of been missing. Just by virtue of not being able to hold these events, not being able to see the players. CCP Convict does a great job by trying to like emulate this on CCP TV.
Yep.
but even then, like it's limited. Like that like personal element, that like being able to nerd out with like your favorite devs element is just been kind of like taken away from us.
Yeah, and furthermore, it like the actual event itself functions as a focusing moment. It doesn't matter as much, or it isn't as, maybe it's not as valuable if you guys have a really awesome art stream one day, if not a lot of people know to go check it out. But like during FanFest, you know that all of the interesting stuff is going to be talked about right now, and so you should be paying attention right now. You don't know when in Convict Stream anything interesting is going to come out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely something really tricky that we've struggled with a bit. The part of the problem is that the discourse online is just so much different than being able to talk to someone in real life. Being able to ask a person a real question, like a real person a question, and not just kind of into the ether, is the level of discourse that you get at an event is so much better and like productive in terms of, you know, sharing thoughts back and forth, whereas it's really difficult to do that on, you know, a place like Reddit, or even on the forums. It can be really hard because you have so many different people all jumping on each thing that's said with a slightly different lens for how they're viewing that thing. And so the conversation just kind of shatters, and you wind up kind of like trying to manage all of the little pieces, that it can be really hard to actually get to the core of what you were trying to say in the first place.
Yeah. It's
Which
also
is a lot easier
timeless.
to manage in a smaller setting, or, you know, when you're talking to someone and you can ask clarifying questions, and you can very clearly see like the reaction on that person's face tells me, that hold on, I don't think I explained this properly. Like, this is how this works, which you don't get online. And instead, you know, you get a lot of passionate emotions, which is great. Like, passionate emotions about a thing that we all collectively love is wonderful. But it's trickier to have a conversation go as deep as they do at those events, which is something that's just particularly of value.
Right. So on that note, as we're winding up this interview, let's look to the future. You know, we also have an announcement that FanFest is coming next year. In fact, it's apparently so important to CCP that this quadrant is focused on the fact that FanFest is coming next year. But teasing aside, tell me and tell the viewers, especially people who may not have ever who've maybe joined within the last year or two, how is this FanFest going to fix all of these problems that we just talked about, and how great is it going to be? How excited?
Sorry, unrelated to FanFest. I just noticed the time, and I'm in about 1 minute. I might have to get up from my seat and run away in order to turn off the security alarm.
Okay.
But this FanFest should be really awesome. So we're actually going back to the location of the some of the earlier FanFests before they were moved to Harpa, for a couple of reasons. Partly, one of the cool things is that it allows us a whole lot more flexibility in terms of decorating it. I've heard a whole bunch of super cool concepts about like making it feel like you're walking into Jita 4.4. Like there's all of these LED screens that Riot had actually used because they had held their Worlds event there. And so there's just all of these LED panels all over the place that we're going to be able to use to kind of like simulate windows and that sort of thing. So that is the alarm. Oh, sorry, 1 second.
No problem.
Never mind. Someone else is getting it. We are
excellent.
Good. It's always tricky when you stay here to 8 p.m. because then we wind up like having to like the alarm goes off and we all run. So
well, again,
are we
I appreciate
you willing
ads
to. In local? Yes, I will be sure to include scam ads in FanFest.
We'll have someone dressed up as a HyperNet relay offer just walking around, and we'll also get the Orca guy to just like give his speech.
We're gonna have somebody in an Orca costume out front spinning around, just trying to knock people away from the doors. I'm kidding. That would be quite funny though. But it's looking like it's going to be a super cool event, and we're finally going to be able to have a bunch of devs talking to players, roundtables, all that good stuff that we've missed for quite a long time. And I'll be busy running the finals for the Eve Invasion tournament, so that is finally happening.
Oh
Since we can
gosh.
finally get people up here to Iceland. Yeah.
Oh man, because when you first said that, I was like, wait, what? And then I realized that again, we had plans, and the universe told us screw our plans, because that's how these things work. I'm impressed that you are, I guess, have the fortitude to go back and be like, nope, we're putting it back right as soon as we can.
I mean, we promised all of these people flights to Iceland, so in order to take part in this, so it's not something that we were just going to forget about. And it's really cool to finally be able to make it happen. It's quite funny that I started out as a competitor in that, going to Vegas and Eve North, and now I'll be the one running it at the end.
Yeah, if we're flying them out here, we might as well make them compete in Vicious Battle. That seems only fair.
Sounds good. I'm excited. Even though I probably won't be able to get there, I'll still be able to watch it and have plenty to talk about, as I often do with such things. Awesome. Well, just to close things up, I do actually have one question that is another one of those ones that you can dodge if you want to, but New Dawn trailer. I mentioned it a couple times on Twitter, and I think even somebody over on your side of the fence liked it, and I was like, no, but really, are we getting one?
I've been so deep in the hole with the Alliance tournament stuff, I'm not actually sure what the plans are. Swift, do you have any insight?
So I do and I don't at the same time. I know the answer.
Oh,
Rather,
no.
the answer was told to me at some point, but I was like so preoccupied with something else that I do not remember what the answer is.
You're a snake,
so
Swift.
as soon as I saw your tweet, I was like, that's a good question. Let me bring that up. But I feel bad asking like the team that literally just gave a presentation on it that day. I was like, I don't want to make them aware that I was ignoring that part, because I wasn't ignoring it. I was just there was something more important preoccupying my mind. But we did get a new trailer, or not trailer, but we did get a new video yesterday.
Yes.
Maybe it was today, which rounds out the the Eve Academy career type things. The career videos.
Right. Soldier of Fortune, right? The
Soldier
PvP.
of Fortune, God of the Battlefield, I think it is.
God of the Battlefield. And so CCP Aurora, you are the one that put the words God of the Battlefield into Miranda's mouth. It's your fault.
That was all her.
Oh, okay.
What I love about those videos is they always feature someone from the community. And
I don't write those scripts.
Oh, okay. So you write. Okay, I got you. So you write the how to scan in wormholes. So when I was tearing apart the wormhole combat basics one, that was you taking it to heart. Got it. Okay.
Well, combat basics was actually Ashy on that one.
Oh.
I was the one who did like how to join a corp, and me and Ashley both contributed to like the wormhole basics one in general. So yeah, it's the educational ones that I do most of.
Fair enough. Wait, wormhole combat is an expert. Either way. All right, cool. So I'm gonna hold out hope for a New Dawn trailer, but go ahead and get back to me if you can. Anything else you guys want to talk about? Otherwise, I'll let you guys go. The alarm went off. That is usually a good indication that I should be letting you guys turn into pumpkins.
No, I think I'm pretty good on topics. It's been an absolute pleasure, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's got a great fan fest. For if you're wondering, is May 6th and 7th. But there's also like those are the official days. There's also like unofficial,
hold on,
unofficial events.
Hold on, hold on. Oh shoot.
To anyone who's watching, you should totally come hang out with us at FanFest. It would be great.
All right, sorry. Proceed. Somebody, I received a phone call or a Telegram call or whatever as I'm streaming, which is awesome. So carry on.
Yes. So 6th and 7th of May is FanFest. It'll be great. It's here in Reykjavik. The cool thing about Reykjavik is it's a quite a small city, so when like 1,000 ETH players show up, you notice the 1,000 ETH players, like we're a big dent in the population. If you've gone to ETH Vegas, you can see how like the players kind of blend in. Same with like ETH London. You're like, it's a big city. These guys blend in. Here, not so much. It's absolutely fantastic. It's a whole new experience, and it'll be a load of fun. And we really earnestly want to see you guys because it's honestly the highlight of a lot of people's days or years when FanFest comes around. Also, thanks for having us. It was really nice to chat about like Alliance Tournament stuff. Like, you'd think that we get to just chat about stuff like this all day, and we do it to some extent, but it's always better to like talk to like the players and just interact with you guys. It's like so much fun. You know me, I can always go on for hours. Same with CSB Aurora. We literally stay here until the alarm goes off, and we'd stay here even longer. But just thanks for having us. And it was just a mountain full of fun.
I can't actually see the stream, but I think he's on the phone.
No, I'm not on the phone. I'm sorry.
Okay.
my son's mom is calling me via Telegram to try to message me. I don't know why, but I sent her a message. I'm sorry. All right. Well, either way, I guess I should probably go ahead and let you guys go and go take care of that then. So yeah, don't be strangers, you guys. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking your time out of your, I guess not your work day, but just past your work day, staying late at the office in order to come and hang out and talk about the Alliance tournament and everything. It's been very rewarding as usual, and can't wait to see you guys again.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having us.
All right. And this will also be on YouTube by tomorrow. This will be on YouTube by tomorrow. Obviously, because of my Twitch agreement or whatever, I have to wait 24 hours. But, you know, you guys, everybody can go over there and subscribe to me on YouTube to get this and all of my other content over there. We will be trying to do more interviews, especially on Wednesdays. And I am streaming most weekdays from 1800 to 2100. So without further ado, I've been Ashtarothi. This has been CSP Aurora and CSP Swift. Thank you all for watching. And until next time, we'll see you in space.